Let's get right into it. Number 8. Isaiah, the prophet of salvation. Isaiah ministered in Judah during the 8th century BC, a time of political upheaval and spiritual decline. His calling came with a vision of God's holiness in the temple, shaping his lifelong mission to call the people back to covenant faithfulness. Isaiah's prophecies carried a dual edge: warnings of judgment against sin and breathtaking promises of redemption. He foretold the coming of a suffering servant who would bear the sins of many, a prophecy that Christians see fulfilled in Jesus Christ. At the same time, he offered visions of global peace, where nations would gather to worship God and weapons of war would be transformed into tools of harvest. What sets Isaiah apart is the depth and scope of his message. His words transcend his own era, speaking to generations about both justice and hope. In the larger biblical arc, Isaiah anchors the promise of salvation, connecting Israel's story to the Messiah's mission. For us today, his voice reminds us that God's plans are not just for survival in hard times, but for ultimate renewal through his redeeming power. Number 7. Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. Jeremiah's ministry spanned the final decades before the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC. Called as a young man, he often faced rejection and hostility because his message was deeply unpopular. He warned that Judah's idolatry, corruption, and reliance on foreign powers would lead to disaster. Known as the weeping prophet, Jeremiah carried God's grief as his own. He lamented the stubbornness of his people, yet remained faithful to proclaiming the truth. His words predicted the destruction of the temple and exile in Babylon, events that marked a turning point in Israel's history. Yet Jeremiah's message was not only of despair. He also delivered one of the Bible's greatest promises: the coming of a new covenant written on the hearts of God's people, not merely on stone tablets. This vision pointed beyond exile toward restoration and renewal. Jeremiah's uniqueness lies in his vulnerability. His struggles, loneliness, and tears became part of the prophetic message. His life teaches us today that faithfulness may be costly, but God's promises endure even in seasons of loss. Number 6. Ezekiel, the prophet of visions. Ezekiel was both a priest and a prophet, ministering among the Jewish exiles in Babylon after Jerusalem's fall. Unlike prophets who spoke within the city walls, Ezekiel's audience was already displaced, grieving the loss of their homeland and their temple. His book is one of the most visually striking in Scripture. He describes the glory of God's throne chariot, the valley of dry bones rising to life, and a renewed temple filled with God's presence. Ezekiel also performed dramatic symbolic acts, lying on his side for days, shaving his head, and enacting the siege of Jerusalem to drive his message home. Ezekiel's central theme was that though God's judgment had come, his presence was not bound to a building or a nation's borders. God was with his people even in exile, and he would restore them. In the biblical story, Ezekiel keeps alive hope amid devastation, paving the way for later themes of resurrection and renewal. For us today, his visions remind us that God can breathe new life into what seems beyond repair, and that his presence never abandons us. Number 5. Daniel, the prophet of faithful witness. Daniel was taken into Babylonian exile as a young man, yet he quickly distinguished himself for his wisdom, integrity, and devotion to God. Rising to high positions under pagan kings, he became a model of faithful living in a foreign land. The first half of his book tells powerful stories: his refusal to eat defiled food, his friends delivered from the fiery furnace, and his own miraculous survival in the lion's den. Each account highlights God's sovereignty and Daniel's courage in the face of pressure. The second half shifts to apocalyptic visions, depicting the rise and fall of empires and pointing to God's everlasting kingdom. These visions shaped Jewish and Christian understanding of history, endurance, and ultimate hope in God's rule. What makes Daniel unique is his combination of personal faithfulness and prophetic foresight. He stood firm without compromise, yet his dreams also revealed the bigger picture of history under God's control. For us today, Daniel inspires courage to live faithfully in cultures that challenge our convictions, reminding us that God's kingdom will prevail. Number 4. Hosea, the prophet of unfailing love. Hosea ministered in the northern kingdom of Israel during the 8th century BC. His life became a living parable when God commanded him to marry Gomer, a woman who would be unfaithful to him. This painful marriage symbolized Israel's repeated unfaithfulness to God. Despite betrayal, Hosea pursued his wife with compassion, reflecting God's relentless love for his people. His message declared that judgment was certain, but God's mercy and faithfulness would never fail. Hosea's children's names, symbolizing judgment, mercy, and restoration, became part of the prophetic message. Hosea's unique contribution is the deeply personal nature of his prophecy. His broken heart mirrored God's own grief and compassion. His book reveals the tension between divine justice and divine love, showing both the seriousness of sin and the depths of God's mercy. Number 3. Joel, the prophet of the day of the Lord. Joel likely ministered in Judah during or after a devastating locust plague. This natural disaster destroyed crops and shook the nation's stability. Joel interpreted it as a warning, a foreshadowing of the greater day of the Lord, when God's judgment and renewal would be revealed. Joel's gift was his ability to connect immediate events to eternal truths. A locust plague became more than a natural disaster. It was a lens through which to see God's purposes. For us today, Joel reminds us that crises can draw us back to God, and that beyond judgment lies the promise of renewal through His Spirit. Number 2. Amos, the prophet of justice. Amos was a shepherd and farmer from Judah who was sent to deliver a message to the wealthy northern kingdom of Israel. He was not a prophet by profession, but his words cut with clarity and conviction. What sets Amos apart is his uncompromising call to link faith with justice. He showed that true devotion to God cannot be separated from how we treat others, especially the vulnerable. In the broader biblical story, Amos broadens the horizon of God's concern, emphasizing that privilege brings accountability. Today, his words challenge us to live out our faith not just in rituals, but in actions, practicing fairness, generosity, and compassion as reflections of God's holiness. Number 1. Lamentations, the cry of a broken nation. Lamentations, traditionally attributed to Jeremiah, captures the grief of Jerusalem after its destruction in 586. The city lay in ruins, its people exiled, and its temple burned. The book is composed of poetic laments, carefully structured into acrostic poems that give form to chaos. In the biblical arc, Lamentations serves as a bridge between judgment and restoration, showing that even in devastation, God's mercy remains. That's all for today. I'll be making more videos like this, so subscribe if you don't miss them.